Hello my spooky bitches, and welcome to my channel, and welcome to my finale of my spooky season series. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed doing it. Although I haven't released as many videos as what I would have liked, I've still really enjoyed doing it because I am a lover of Halloween. I love autumn as well. I love the transition into autumn. I like it when the nights start to get a little bit darker, a little bit colder. Yeah, I'm one of those winter freaks. I love winter. I really do. It just gives me like the perfect excuse to be lazy and not really do anything. I'm a bit of a social recluse, and I feel like in the summer it's kind of not socially acceptable to just spend most of your days indoors. You have to go out in the sun, and I don't really like the sun. It's too bright, it's too warm for me, so I much prefer the winter. And yeah, I especially love Halloween. It's just spooky season. I love it. It's my favourite. I love all things spooky. I'm so into like the horror scene. Like I love all horror films, even, you know, the cheesy slasher 80s style horror movies. I love all of them, and I'm just one of those freaks. So yeah. Anyways, this week's case and my finale is bang on topic. It takes place on Halloween, and it is actually an unsolved case, so it provides a lot of mystery. There really hasn't been any suspects. No one really knows who could have done it. However, there are a lot of theories, which is the one thing I do enjoy about doing unsolved cases. Obviously, I've said to you guys before that I don't really like doing unsolved cases because I like to have closure, but I do enjoy like the theory portion of unsolved cases, and I do find that really interesting. I like to come up with my own ideas. I like to hear other people's ideas. I like to have a look on Reddit. I like looking on Reddit. I just like, some people just come up with some really interesting educational theories as well, and some things that you look at and you think, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. So anyways, towards the end of the episode I will get into the theory portion, but what I'm going to do, because there isn't much information, I'm just going to really dive straight into what happens, basically the main event. So just before I do, I just want to say that if, like me, you are interested in true crime, then please hit the subscribe button, and also turn your notifications on, because then you'll be notified every time I do a video. Obviously at the minute I haven't been doing it on a specific day, so you know, obviously you wouldn't really know when I'm posting it. I do put it on my social media, but if you don't follow me then you won't know. So yeah, turn your notifications on, and then you'll know. So let's dive straight in. We are going to go back to 1986. This is a 34-year-old unsolved case. It was the morning after Halloween on 1986 that the body of 15-year-old Haim Weiss was found. His body was found in his dormitory. He was Jewish, he was an Orthodox Jew, and he stayed at what I would kind of describe it to be like a Jewish only like college, basically. Well, school, college, whatever. And yeah, that's what he attended, so he lived there. And he did so well, in fact, that he had his own room, which wasn't common practice within these yeshiva. That's the name of these schools. Haim Weiss was, I think him and another boy were the only ones in their yeshiva that had their own room. Everyone else predominantly had to share a room with another boy. He was pretty lucky, and he obviously was quite, I don't know, I guess high up and was doing very well, so he had his own room. I think after school on the night of Halloween, he just returned to his room as usual and went to sleep. And then the next morning, by a fellow student, he come in to check on Haim because he was running late to his prayer. So he goes into his room and checks on him, and that's when he finds that Haim had been brutally murdered. He was brutally murdered with an unknown object, and he was struck multiple times on the head, and it was a very brutal attack. On this day as well, I forgot to mention, it was Sabbath, so obviously everyone within the yeshiva were going to be busy, and they were going to be at their Sabbath. I don't really know what they do, if they're just going to be praying and whatever, but yeah, all of the students, the staff, everyone would have been there. And I think that's why his friend was coming to collect him so that they could walk together. So then this boy calls the police, and the police arrive pretty promptly, and they come and evaluate the scene. And it was quite a strange scene. There wasn't really much evidence. There was no sign of forced entry whatsoever. And there was actually what was seen as Orthodox Jewish practices. And it was things like that there was a candle that was lit next to Haim's body, and there was a window left open, which this is common practice within Jewish tradition. Once someone has died, they open the window or open a door to allow the spirit to leave the body. So police, upon noticing this, they immediately suspect that it had to have been either an inside job or someone that was Jewish. However, once they looked around the scene and tried to gather all of their evidence together, it became quite apparent that they weren't allowed to interview anyone because where it was Sabbath, everyone was busy, and they were not allowed to leave in order to talk to anyone. The police noticed that Haim's body was also moved twice, which this is apparently a Jewish tradition as well. I don't know for what reason. I don't know why they moved the body. So yeah, again, that was another clue to the fact that it could potentially have been someone that is Jewish. So the main investigator in this homicide was a man named Detective Daly. He tried to piece together everything that may have happened, what could have led to this murder, and there didn't really seem to be anything. Like, there didn't really seem to be anyone that would have any motive. Also, we need to remember this boy was only 15. What do you have against a 15-year-old boy? So police were kind of stumped. They had no idea who could have done this. So once Detective Daly could actually speak with some of the students, he learned that Haim was a very well-liked student. He was incredibly outgoing. He was so clever, and there didn't seem to be any reason why anyone would want to kill him. He just seemed to be a standard, hard-working, intelligent, polite, well-mannered 15-year-old boy, which is quite a rarity these days, although this was in 1986. Detective Daly tried to piece it all together on the night that Haim was killed, which was Halloween. So upon talking with students, he learned basically Haim's last moments, well, last few hours before he died. So he left class to attend services, and afterwards he returned to his dorm. And several hours later, some classmates saw Haim just sitting in his hallway outside of his dorm just reading. And this was apparently customary because during Sabbath, students weren't allowed to have the lights on in their rooms. So there was obviously lights on in the hallway. So he wanted to read. He went out into the hallway and read. That didn't seem odd. So he was last seen alive at 1 a.m. on November the 1st. No students are reported hearing or seeing anything suspicious. However, one student who just lived a few doors down from Haim, actually reported that there was one point throughout the night, early hours in the morning, that his door was open, like quickly opened and then closed by someone. He just presumed it was another student that, I don't know, forgot where his room was and quickly shut it after realising it wasn't his room, and then went to his room. So this student obviously didn't really think anything of it, which I wouldn't have at the time, but obviously after hearing about Haim's death, that's when he thought that was a bit odd. So it could potentially have been the killer who was trying to find Haim, realised that boy wasn't him, and then went and found Haim and brutally murdered him. Just a few days after the murder, Detective Daly, he called a meeting with some of the students and some of the rabbis just to get some more information, because the information he had was very limited. He just had a bit of a background on Haim, but that was it. He didn't really have anything that he could sort of go on. He had no leads. So he called this meeting and nobody offered up any information. However, Daly learnt that their religion prevented them from coming forward with information, which again makes it seem like it was definitely an inside job, because this person within the yeshiva would have known. No one could have done anything about it. No one would have said anything or done anything. Pretty clever if you ask me. At this point, police are just completely stumped. They just have nothing to go. Like, I couldn't imagine being a detective in this case, because it must have been so fucking hard. Like, there was no leads, there was nothing, there was no evidence, there was no, obviously there was no fingerprint, there was no like advanced DNA testing back then. So they had nothing. So Detective Daly then decides to polygraph about 40 students and some rabbis, but again, it all comes back fine. And once again, they're back to the drawing board and they just have no idea what to do. That is pretty much it for everything that happens within this case in regards to the actual murder, the evidence. That was pretty much it. And even to this day, this case still remains unsolved. And Detective Daly and Haim's family are still trying so hard to get his murder solved and to find the culprit who did it, which it really breaks my heart as well. One, it's like, why on earth would you murder a 15-year-old boy? You see what he looked like. I know it's stupid, but if you see what he looked like, he just looks so innocent and he looks so young. He looks young for a 15-year-old boy. I know you're young when you're 15, but he looked a lot younger than 15. And it's just really sad. Like, there doesn't seem to be any proper motive for this young boy's life being taken away. It's like, what motive could there have been? What could he have seen? What could he have been involved in for him to have his life taken away? It doesn't seem like there was anything. There was any kind of rhyme or reason for this young boy to have his life taken. And it's just really sad for the family as well. It's like, although, you know, if they found the murderer, it's not like they'd be like, oh yes, we can move on now. It's not like that, because obviously when you've lost a loved one, you never fully have like complete closure, and you never get over that. That pain sticks with you until the day that you die. However, trying to find the person who is responsible and the reasoning for it, it does give you some sense of closure, and also it reassures you to know that this would never happen again. Maybe Haim's family were fearful that the person who killed him could come and kill them as well. So it is a lot more reassuring to know that that person has been caught and is behind bars, but unfortunately that didn't happen in this case. With the suspects, there aren't really any known. Like, there's none that have been formally named, but obviously, like I said before, it is pretty evident to me, to people that have learnt about this case, and to the police as well, that the person who committed this crime is very familiar with Orthodox traditions. It is also believed that the killer kind of knew the layout of the dorm as well, which could have meant that maybe it was a student. And the killer was probably aware that Haim was the only one, well, only one of two within the whole yeshiva that had his own room. So he the killer must have known Haim pretty well to know that information. So now we're going to get into the police theories. Like there's a few, but they've never been confirmed. They've just been a few leads. So like I said, there's no actual concrete suspects. So the investigators looked into a janitor within the school and also a mentally ill man who attacked senior citizens within their home in yeshiva around 1986. However, both were cleared and nothing more come of that. And in 2013, Haim's case was reopened by new people that took on the case. They decided, with a fresh pair of eyes, they could maybe add something more to it and maybe look back into it and find something interesting. They interviewed more than 100 former students, but they made very little progress because obviously, like I said, they couldn't really say anything. It was against their religion, which I just find really strange. I don't know why that's part of their religion, to not speak out and not come forward with any informative information. It's just bizarre. But in 2015, investigators actually announced that they believe a student or faculty member was involved in Haim's murder. Because obviously with the evidence that I've gone through, it must have been someone that was familiar with Jewish tradition and Haim as well, because they must have known that he was the only, one of two that had his own room. And Haim must have known him as well, because there was no forced entry. And so he must have willingly opened a door to this person, and he must have known him. But even though they announced that it must have been someone that Haim knew and was within the yeshiva, they still didn't have enough evidence. It was mainly circumstantial. They didn't have any concrete evidence to come forward and say that they had a specific suspect. And in November of 2017, Haim's father actually come forward and he did an interview, and he come forward with some interesting information and stated that there was some bizarre occurrences that happened before Haim's death. So I'm just gonna look at the screen and read it out. So in July of 1986, Haim had called him from summer camp. He was crying and said that he wanted to come home. According to Anton, which is Haim's dad, this was really out of character for him. In August, Haim went to visit his grandparents in Europe, and during this time, the yeshiva's principal, Rabbi Avram Cooper, called Anton several times, asking when Haim would be back home. He felt that this was suspicious, and on another occasion, Cooper had Anton bring Haim to his home to talk with him alone, which is kind of weird. After meeting for about 10 minutes, Haim returned to his father. However, he was reluctant to talk about the meeting. Anton suspects that Rabbi Cooper may have information about Haim's murder. Some have speculated that he may be involved, and a former student has since come forward claiming that he had been physically abused by a rabbi. He claimed that Rabbi Cooper did nothing to stop the abuse. The alleged abuse occurred approximately 10 years prior to the murder. And despite all of these allegations, no one has been charged in the case. So is it possible that maybe Haim was a victim of some kind of physical or sexual abuse within the yeshiva? and maybe he decided that he was going to speak out. He was going to go against his religion, and he was going to speak out with the police and tell them what had happened to him. Or maybe he knew of another student that had been physically or sexually abused. Again, this is just speculation. So then maybe the person who, maybe the rabbi, one of the rabbis who had committed this physical or sexual abuse, then decided to silence Haim forever. So this is a possibility. I think, for me personally, this is the theory that I'm leaning more towards. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm not saying that like any of the rabbis were physically or sexually abusive. The one that obviously had committed this physical abuse, that was 10 years prior. So I'm guessing / hoping he was fired. So I don't know, or maybe was it not necessarily tradition, but was it common practice for rabbis within that yeshiva to physically or sexually abuse their students? It has been known. We've known it with a lot of priests within Catholic churches, Christian churches. It has happened, so it is a possibility. So I think we can all agree that this is an incredibly tragic story. A 15-year-old boy lost his life, which seemed to have no rhyme or reason at all. I can't begin to imagine how his family must still be feeling, not having any form of closure, not knowing what actually happened to Haim and why. That is it for my spooky season finale. It's incredibly sad. I've really loved doing it. That is it for this episode. There's not much more to it. It was pretty much, well, not pretty much black and white, because there's just so much more to it that we just don't know about, and it is incredibly frustrating. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed me talking about it. I hope you enjoyed my spooky season series. Please, as always, give me your thoughts and opinions. I always love to hear them. Even if it's constructive criticism, I always love to hear it. So that is it for this week, and I will resume Toxic Crime Tuesdays on Tuesday. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys on Tuesday. Goodbye.